Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Amna Gul from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. We're back with the course Fundamentals of Public Relations, bearing the code GMC 331, as well as the course Advertising for Media, bearing the code GMC 332. It's our 21st lecture today, and the topic is persuasion. Well, persuasion is an umbrella term for influence. Persuasion can attempt to influence a person's beliefs, attitudes, intentions, motivations, or behaviors. In public relations and advertising, persuasion is a process aimed at changing a person's or a group's attitude or behavior towards some event or towards some idea, some object, or some other person by using written, spoken words or visual tools to convey information, feelings, reasoning, or a combination thereof. So persuasion is also often used as a tool in pursuit of personal gain, such as election campaigning, giving sales pitch, or in trial advocacy. Persuasion can also be interpreted as using one's personal or positional resources to change people's behaviors or attitudes. Systematic persuasion is a process through which attitudes and beliefs are influenced by appeals to logic and reason. Public relations and advertising are thus referred to as the business of persuasion. You see, both public relations and advertising, they are actually based on dealing with the image people have of certain products or organizations, and how these things make things different for them. So it is all about influencing the minds of people, influencing the habits of people with regard to that organization or the product, whatever it is. So we'll be discussing actually persuasion, but with the perspective of public relations and advertising today. Obviously, we'll start off with what persuasion is. So actually, persuasion began with the Greeks, who emphasized rhetoric as the highest standard for a successful politician. All trials were held in front of the assembly, and both the prosecution and the defense rested, as they often do today even, on the persuasiveness of the speaker. Rhetoric was the ability to find the available means of persuasion in any instance. The Greek philosopher Aristotle listed 4 reasons why one should learn the art of persuasion. The first reason being that truth and justice are perfect. Thus, if a case loses, it is the fault of the speaker. Secondly, persuasion is an excellent tool for teaching. Thirdly, a good rhetorician needs to know how to argue both sides to understand the whole problem and all the options. And finally, there is no better way to defend oneself other than persuasion. For public relations and advertising, actually, the advertiser also needs to know both sides of the argument, and then they have to persuade. Then they are the best defense for themselves. Then they can put up their case very well. All the ideas have some plus points, obviously, so they put those forward. As for the case of public relations, once again, if it is on the public relations of any organization, obviously, if the organization doesn't defend itself well in terms of any crisis, who else will? So it is about public relations. Then if that organization doesn't speak better about itself, doesn't highlight its plus points, who else will? So actually, persuasion is the lifeblood of not only advertising industry, but also the business of public relations. So we'll move forward to persuasion. Rhetoric, it is like used interchangeably. Rhetoric is actually the ancient art and science of persuasion, the study of persuasion, and the individual process of persuasion. Unfortunately, in the current century, rhetoric tends to be positioned as something separate from everyday communication. However, all human activities are rhetorical, whether or not we are aware of it. That is the only difference in it. Rhetoric is about actually strategic choices and approaches to communication, whether that communication is textual, verbal, or oral, or even visual. See, when you want, for example, if you are an advertiser. Consider yourself as an advertiser. So if you are advertising something, you have to decide even the colors, how to present it, what kind of image do you want to communicate about that thing. So it's a strategic choice about what kind of communication you want, what is your approach towards communication. Now consider yourself as a public relations expert. If you are representing any organization, so you need to make strategic choices. What kind of images, what kind of communication do you want to make on behalf of that organization? How do you want that organization to be seen by people, by the general public? So this is once again a lot of strategic choices going on with regard to the kind of communication you want to have. So whenever we communicate to different types of audiences, let's suppose about the very same topic, we make strategic decisions on what details to include or omit, what types of evidence or support to use, and so on. So rhetoric is actually it is the study and the art of writing and speaking persuasively. Its aim is to inform, educate, persuade, or motivate specific audiences in specific situations. Thus, as Plato rightfully said, rhetoric is the art of ruling the minds of men. Yes, it is the art. And public relations and advertising, they obviously want to rule the people. So, let me explain an example. Yeah, good idea. As I just mentioned, that for example, if you have to relate the very same topic or the very same event to different audiences, you make strategic choices. See, so rhetoric is not just a tool used in, for example, formal speeches or in specific writings. Rather, it is in all kinds of communications made by that organization, be those advertising related communications or public relations related communication. I'll start off with a very journal example. Let's imagine that you spent a little bit of your time on the weekend studying, but most of the time was party hopping and celebrating because, for example, your department's team won the tug of war competition. I'm using this example because you people actually had a tug of war competition recently. So when you speak to your best friend about your weekend, you're likely to provide details about how you celebrated the victory and what exactly you did at the celebration, including gossip about mutual friends. Now, discussing the same with, for example, when you speak about it to your grandmother, for example. So, when you speak to your grandmother about the same weekend, you might mention your study group meeting. Let's suppose it was on Sunday afternoon, or the takeout dinner you had on Friday night, and perhaps briefly mention that you celebrated the team's win with your friends. So see, the choice of activities that you actually told the two people is different. Now let's take it a bit further as well. When you speak of your about the same weekend to your, let's suppose, internship supervisor here on the campus radio station, you're likely to discuss the big tug of war win because the department is the same. You might discuss your online classes schedule and how your study and assignment schedule will impact your availability to work for the radio in upcoming months. So see, it is about the same weekend. It is about the same things happening on the same weekend. But since your audience is getting different, so you make different strategic choices about what needs to be communicated to whom with how much detail. So this is actually rhetoric. This is actually your strategic choices. Now we'll explain it. I'll explain it a little further by moving towards rhetorical situation. All versions are accurate representations of your weekend, but you make strategic choices about which details to include or not to include based on the particular rhetorical situation of your discussion. So this is what you need to understand in terms of public relations and in terms of advertising. Not all information is meant for all types of publics. See, we've already understood that there is some business to business advertising, there is also consumer advertising. So the kind of information that goes in business to business advertising is not the same kind of information that goes in consumer advertising. Same is the case with public relations. When you are talking to internal, for example, publics, when you're communicating with the internal publics, it is a different kind of information that you are sharing with them. While with external publics, you may choose to share some other information or some other parts of the information. You might skip some and you might add some. So, to use rhetoric, you must first analyze the rhetorical situation you are in. An effective speech or an effective communication is one that responds to its rhetorical situation, which is actually the context of that situation. Then you need to identify what needs to be communicated depending on who your audience is, what are the circumstances are. So you need to identify what needs to be communicated and what you should not communicate. Then finally, you need to provide a strategic response using rhetorical tools. So this was a bit of an introduction of rhetorical situation. Now I'll explain each of these things in detail to you. So the first thing, the rhetor, or which is you yourself, be it advertising, be it public relations, I'm discussing it with you as if you are the advertiser, as if you are the public relations expert or the public relations officer. So that is why you are the rhetor. See, the person communicating to the audience is the rhetor. Your personal characteristics, your beliefs, these will influence what you decide to say. For example, what kind of your characteristics? Your age, your gender, your geographic location, maybe your education, your past experiences, your socioeconomic status, all different kinds of these, all of your characteristics, your interests, your hobbies. These all influence what you decide to say. Because, for example, I'm not at all a cricket fan. For me, I don't even have the basic information about cricket, for example. So if there is anything going on, I do not even differentiate between a T20 or a World Cup or what else. These are test series and stuff. So for me, if I were to communicate about cricket, I would just say cricket. That's it. I don't understand the differences in it. But for example, someone being passionate about it, so they will be knowing what kind of competitions are going on these days, which series is going on, who is on top, who is not. So just the interest, it changes things. See? So what I was saying, the writer is you yourself. It's the writer or the author or the creator of the advertisement, dependent on whatever we are creating, whatever we are putting forward. So let me call it the communicator. So communicators, just like their audience, they're influenced by a number of things like their age, their location, their perspective, their bias, the culture, experiences, as well as expectations. Communicators may need to consider if the traits they are bringing in may have a positive or negative outcome. For example, even if someone is very passionate about stopping animal testing, to convince others, they may have to show restraint in expressing all of their personal views about people who test products on animals. If these are the people they must convince, no matter what the communicators may personally feel, communicators should avoid insulting or degrading their audience if they have a chance at motivating change. So, for example, whatever your basic characteristics are, they influence what you say, but still you need to keep a check on what you are communicating. Remember, we come across so many advertisements. I've shown you an advertisement about Tanishq that actually that was showing interfaith harmony, but since they were keeping just their perspective in mind, it actually it actually moved towards a discussion on Islam jihad or faith jihad. So once again, you have to be very, very careful what you're communicating and how. The second thing important in a rhetorical situation is the audience. The people who you are trying to persuade is your audience. Usually the same factors that affect the rhetor affect the audience. Think about what they already know. So they need to think about what they already know, what questions or reservations they might have, what expectations do they have, what should you confirm to or stray from these expectations. For example, when they have certain expectations, which expectations should you fulfill? Which expectations you should refrain from fulfilling? So when planning any communication, always consider who is being addressed. Audiences bring in their own perspectives, their biases, their experiences, and expectations, which can make communicating to a particular audience very difficult. So it's once again a very thin line, and you have to be very careful about what you're communicating. The third thing, the setting, which is the situation which causes the need for your communication. For example, current events, the location, the time period, the political situation, the weather, it can be anything. Where is the communication happening and when? How do these impact you? For example, rhetor may need to differ between countries. This is very important. We've come across public relation campaigns, we've come across advertising campaigns that failed because they just thought a one-size-fits-all approach will work. They copy one thing. If one thing is successful in one country, for example, they copy the same for another country where it fails because the setting is different, the audiences is different. So obviously your communication had to be different. This they do not understand. Many important companies, for example, Dove came up with a very good campaign. It was supposed to be an excellent campaign at public relations, and it was advertising because they were talking about, they actually tried to show that people from all different backgrounds use Dove. However, the backlash came in as the advertisement was and the campaign was seen as racist by people. And the Dove had to withdraw that thing. So see, you have to be very particular what you are using where. The setting is actually the context. It describes the circumstances surrounding the communication, which include the time when it is communicated, the location where it is communicated, and other events surrounding the communication, especially the culture. Culture is something very important and needs a thorough understanding of the culture in order to ensure that the advertisers and public relations experts, whatever they are communicating, is in their benefit and not the other way around. Okay, now the fourth thing, that is the topic. Well, the topic needs to be relevant to the rhetorical situation you are in. How does your topic limit what you can do for the audience? Depending on your audience, what should you include or exclude? Once again, whenever you are talking about anything, let's suppose even if it is an advertisement for, let's suppose, selling Lipton Danadar. So even depending on that, you have to understand what kind of audience is there and what you can include or exclude. You come across Lipton Danadar advertisements that can be taken as a good enough public service advertisement as well, because it is relevant to the audience. They look into what can work, what does not work. People are more into public service these days, or social responsibility these days. So even the advertisements are like this. Same is the case, for example, there is a public relations event that you're having. There, the CEO or for example, whoever is heading the organization is going to have a speech. So what does he or she need to speak about? For example, someone is coming over, for the university is having a convocation, the VC is having a speech. what should the topic be, what needs to be included and what needs to be excluded in that speech, depending on the type of audience. The same VC or the same governor might have another speech somewhere else, and they might include or exclude things accordingly, dependent on the audience and the setting. So the topic is obviously like that. Finally, the purpose. Why are you saying whatever you are saying? Is it meant to entertain, or is it meant to educate, or to persuade for certain thing, or to instigate action? So you need to consider what the purpose of the communication is. Depending on that, you actually decide all of these things. So rhetoric actually requires an understanding of the language and knowledge of the culture, because words, we have already studied these things. Words carry emotions, words have meanings, they have their connotative as well as denotative meanings. So you have to be very careful about all these things when planning any advertisement or public relations campaign. Having said that, we'll move a bit forward to tools for creating persuasive communications, which are actually the 5 canons of rhetoric. These are the tools for creating persuasive communications. The first one, invention. The process of developing an argument. For this, for example, you need to know, or you need to pick effective content and sort through every day, you could say, and decide what should be included or excluded. So, for example, invention is developing an argument, what you need to add in that argument. There needs to be a balance between what the audience needs to hear and what you need to say. See, whenever there are advertisements, for example, they always tend to start off with how to make people feel better about their lives. So the kind of argument they pick up is, if you buy, for example, ABC cream or XYZ soap or a shampoo or even a mobile, your life will be better off. You'll be better off. See? So they actually tend to see what kind of things people want to know, they want to hear about. And accordingly, you as an advertiser or you as a public relations expert decide what you need to say. Your goal actually is to create an effective argument. For example, when convincing, for example, when you're convincing the university to provide healthier food at the in-campus cafes, you would want to find credible information on nutrition, the health of youngsters or youth, as well as other related information. You may want to look up how nutrition affects learning. You might study about obesity or nutrition affecting temperament. So you may want to look up how many university students rely on cafe food as the only calorie-controlled and nutritious meal they will get to eat. Some types of evidence you may choose are to use are facts and figures, statistics, statements by the authority, or an expert testimony. So you actually choose what kinds of different things you can have. So this was just an example of you communicating within the university. So, for example, if you are communicating on nation level through an advertisement or through a public relations campaign, so you need to understand that how you can create an effective argument. That is very, very important to you. Then once you are into this, that the kind of things you want to add and the kinds of things you want to avoid, then you need to plan the arrangement. What is the arrangement? That is, once you have determined the content, you must now organize and order your communication to create the most impact, such as thinking about how long each section should be and what should follow on from one point, dependent on whatever your communication is. Is it a press release? Is it an advertisement? Is it a speech made by any important person in your organization. So arrangement is actually the disposition. It is also known as, or rather, disposition. It is the way you arrange and organize your subject matter with the goal of maximum impact. After using invention to come up with your arguments, disposition allows you to focus on selecting various arguments and organizing them into an effective communication. Aristotle specified two essentials: the statement of the case and the proof of the case. So simply, you would state what your case is and then you would prove it. Be it for, once again, be it for public relations or advertising. And I'll go into very specific details once we are through with what rhetoric is. I'll go into very specific details and examples of how this is used. Now, the third thing, that is style. Style is actually deciding how to present your chosen arguments. It includes thinking tactically about how your audience will respond to your word choices. Perhaps you would want to include visualization or other techniques to evoke emotions. Once again, once you are done with the kind of arguments you want to use, then you decide their arrangement, what comes first, what goes after, and then the style, how to present those things. Style, according to its ancient definition, it includes correctness, for example, in terms of correctness of grammar. It includes clearness, for example, the use of words in their everyday sense. It includes appropriateness, for example, the communication being appropriate to the situation, and ornamentation, that is the figures of speech and figures of thought that are properly used. So style is, once again, quite detailed a thing. Once you are done with style, the fourth thing is memory. This comes for public relations only. For example, when you are having a speech, so you need to memorize your speech. When speaking, it is important to both memorize your speech and to make it memorable. See, so it is once again twofold kind of a thing. Additionally, you should memorize famous quotes and stockpile these and literary references, as they can be useful for you in future. So once again, this is quite handy. Finally, it is delivery. It includes your projection, gestures, eye contact, pronunciation, tone and pace, be those for recorded setups as in the case of advertisements, or be those live. Once again, it is all of these things. So delivery is the way in which you convey your message. It's how you say what you say. I'll repeat it. Delivery is how you say what you say. So if you have, for example, an advertisement, so in that advertisement, you're just, for example, telling someone that the best cellular network is Ufone. Don't state it like that. The advertisements are so catchy. They make use of so many things to tell you that, for example, Ufone is the best cellular network. So you have to understand this thing. Same is the case with public relations. For example, you tell someone that this is that Cust is the best university with regards to journalism, for example. So you don't state it the same as it is. You plan so many things at the back of it. You provide proofs for all of this. And then you actually work it out how you're going to present this very information. So it may include, for example, the body language, for example, if it is a live communication, the voice of the person, for example, if you are that person, your posture, your gesture, and the eye contact that you are making, it all affects the success of your story. So you have to be very, very careful about that. For example, the vocal component of your delivery, it involves the tone of your voice and how loudly or how quietly you speak. See, just this tone of sound, the way you speak it, the way you address that thing, it makes a difference. So you can use techniques like speaking faster and faster and faster and faster to indicate excitement, or more quietly to convey confidentiality. I've just tried this out, otherwise, I'm just saying it right. So, once again, if you want to show excitement, you try to speak faster because excitement is energy. So, you show that energy in your communication. And when, for example, there's something that you are sorrowful about or something that demands confidentiality, you might speak more quietly in subtle tones because that ultimately conveys that very thing. So, for example, if there has been certain casualties and the PRO is addressing that kind of a thing, so obviously he's not going to be excited and he's not going to speak faster. Rather, he has to convey the sorrow through the kind of language he's even using. So that's all for today. We'll catch up more on this, and this is a very important topic. I hope you like it. Thanks.